Welcome to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong, an unscripted podcast where Josh and Sean have an open and frank discussion about what's on their minds. After last week's episode all about death, we thought we would do something a little more upbeat this week, but somehow we ended up talking about migration, climate breakdown, racism, the state of US politics, and all that other fun stuff. Enjoy the ride.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. This is a podcast where Josh and I talk about love, life, politics, soap operas. I don't know why I said soap operas there, but maybe that's something we should talk about.
We talked about soap operas?
I'm writing that down. That's something that we should cover. All sorts of things, and we go on lots of weird and wild journeys. Now we are... so hi Josh, how are you?
Hi, I'm okay, thanks. I'm okay. I've got a bit of a sinus infection, but I've been dosing up on the Lemsip, and I'm okay. But we have been having some technological challenges today, so we're not sure whether this recording is going to work or not. So we're just winging it, which is actually what we do every week. So it's in some ways it's no different to what we do every week anyway. But I'm okay.
Is this? What's the biggest?
How are you, Sean?
Well, I want to start by asking you, what's the biggest drama or blunder or scenario you've found yourself in because of technology going wrong? What's the worst?
Oh God, let me think. But I just wanted to point out, like, we're pretending like, like we've just popped up onto our screens. I'm like, how are you, Sean? Like we haven't for the last 3 hours been trying to record this episode. I'm like, hi, how are you? Anyway, what's the biggest technological that's been my responsibility, or just that I've been involved in?
Yeah, something you've been involved in, something that's really caused you a lot of trouble, or it's gotten you in trouble, or you've maybe at work.
At work, I don't recall any sort of technological blunder. There have been other blunders at work, being really hungover and sleeping through my alarm and stuff like that. But technological blunder, I don't know. I don't think. What about you? Have you been involved in any tech scandals?
No tech scandals, but probably the worst thing that ever happened to me with technology is when I decided for some reason to get rid of all of my music, like all of my records and all of my CDs. And so I decided to burn all of my CDs onto the hard drive of my laptop. And I mean, everything that I collected all my life. And then I got rid of all of the CDs. I either sold them or gave them away. And then the laptop just fried. After, I don't know, a couple of weeks of having it on there, it completely wouldn't switch on. I took it to the repair shop and they opened it up and they just said, yeah, this is not functioning. It will never function again. But they took out the hard
doesn't have
disk.
The range.
Yeah, they took out the hard disk and gave it to me and said, in case in the future technology ever changes and finds a way to save this, all your music will be on there somehow, but it will be in unsupported file format. If there was a Prince CD, the songs will just be all randomly. However, they said maybe someone someday can fix it for you. And I felt like my life was over. I was so upset by that.
Yeah, that sucks.
But why do...
I don't think I've ever been... Go ahead.
We have a delay, so I don't know if you're going to speak or
we haven't.
going to speak. This is a technological blunder.
You were saying, why do? This is it. It's happening live in my life now.
When we have technology that we rely on, I mean, this technology that we're using for this has worked relatively smoothly, but today it's not working very well at all. So it is so
Hmm.
frustrating when it doesn't work the way it's meant to. And we get so used to things just working, like our phones working or the streaming service working, that when something goes wrong, it feels like the biggest slight against you or the biggest inconvenience you can imagine.
Well, it's because there's just, we're not computer scientists. So I think I've said that before on the podcast. When things go wrong and you haven't changed any of the variables, like if you're using the same laptop, the same internet connection, the same microphone, everything, the same browser as you've always used, and it doesn't work. Anyway, I'm mindful of that being a very boring topic for our listeners to hear us moan about. But yeah, my sympathies. Yeah, I remember you lost. There was a rare Prince album, wasn't there? That I think was it the hits and the B-sides that you lost in that hard drive fiasco.
I lost everything. Like I had shampoo, CD singles, and EPs from Japan that I downloaded the tracks from. I lost every single piece of music from CD that I had. So I was very upset. I can't think of anything worse than that. I can remember once when I went to where did I go? Maybe I went to Las Vegas to see Lady Gaga in concert, and the Ticketmaster app would not let me open like to see the ticket. Like it was saying that I was a UK customer, so I could not access US tickets, and I had to go to somebody and physically get help in this casino to say this is happening. And they said, "Oh yeah, this happens to everyone from the UK. We'll just let you in. We'll look up your ticket a different way." And it's just stuff like that.
Yeah.
It feels so unnecessary, you know.
Yeah, I had a moment of panic when I went to see Stevie Nicks in Hyde Park in the summer, and the app wouldn't load. I mean, it was just in the middle of Hyde Park. There's barely any mobile signal, and they were just sort of like looking at me like it had never happened before. They were looking at
Yeah,
me like, yeah, well, if you can't load your ticket, you can't come in. And I was like, well, yeah, but there's no. Anyway, after about 5 minutes of just trying constantly to refresh a page, it worked. But yeah, it's that moment of like, oh my god, what am I going to do?
that happened to me when I went to see Carly Rae Jepsen at Alexandra Palace. You had to show
Hmm.
your ticket on your phone, and you needed cell, phone signal, mobile phone signal. And I think
Mm.
Alexandra Palace is one of those really notorious like dead spots for phone service. So there were all of these people outside in like outside Alexandra Palace holding their mobile phones up and walking around with them in the air. Everyone trying to get a signal on top of this hill outside London so they could get inside and we could hear
Mm.
like the music starting. She wasn't on stage, but it was getting very close to her being on stage, and all these queens were running around like outside Carly Rae concert trying to get signal so they could get inside. And I was like, surely there's a better way of doing this. Like, why are we so dependent on that sort of
Yeah,
technology?
it's bullshit. Like it's really, you still pay a fee to Ticketmaster to get your
Mm-hmm.
fucking digital ticket, whatever. So you're still paying them a fee for issuing you a digital ticket, but then it's your responsibility to own a mobile device, to upkeep your mobile device, to replace your mobile device every so many years, whatever, and pay for the provider and everything, and then try to get online and access your ticket. And it's just like, well, anyway, it's there's a tirade, but maybe it's affected by the last 3 hours, actually more than 3 hours of trying to get this platform working for us to record an episode today. Oh, hang on a second, we've got a delay again. I was just going
We've
to
had
say
the
I'm
delay the
a
whole
bit stressed because
time.
I'm
We've had
flying
the delay
to
the
this.
entire time. I
Well, I
don't
know,
know.
but I don't know. It's just it's
I'm just going to talk, and then you jump in when you want to, because it's really really quite a severe delay, I think. But Stevie Nicks was on Saturday Night Live, and I wanted to know if you watched any of the performances.
I didn't watch it. I saw a clip on Instagram that I don't know. I probably will watch it at some point, but how am I going to say this without sounding too vile? Like, Stevie is an incredible artist with an incredible legacy. I, I don't really like Saturday Night Live. Regardless, like it's just I don't find I always find the humor so dumb and so obvious. It's not clever humor. And I know that just sounds like a snobby English thing to say, but I just don't find it to be intelligent humor. It's just real. It's not quite slapstick, but it's really just like basic comedy. And the other thing is, I find Stevie Nicks to be a little bit. I don't know. I prefer not to watch interviews with Stevie or see her sort of off stage too much, because I like to keep the mystique that she's like, this witchy, mysterious person, and often she's not. I like to keep the air of that alive. Like when she talked between songs in Hyde Park in the summer, it was a bit like, yeah, okay, just I don't know. It was just she's not that great conversationalist, I suppose. She always comes across as quite condescending, I think, or quite sort of, and that's kind of like, I love that in some ways. She's earned the right to think of herself that way, but it's like sometimes it just doesn't really come across very well. Anyway, I know I'm just talking because there's such a delay that I'm waiting for you to just jump in and interrupt me.
But have you ever seen a performer that you think is particularly good at onstage banter? Somebody who has got that art down to a fine form, where they can talk to the crowd in between songs and it doesn't sound forced?
Oh yeah, lots. I mean, Amy Mann is quite good at it. I think she's got a very very dry sense of humor, and she doesn't say much. She says few words, but when she does, they're quite funny often, quite cutting. Ingrid Michaelson is very good at the on stage banter between songs. Oh, there must be loads. What about you?
Well, I did mention a little while ago in a few episodes back about going to see John Reese from Rocket from the Crypt,
Oh
but with
yeah.
his new band. And to me, he is incredibly entertaining and engaging and tells stories, and they flow seamlessly, and he can do off the cuff comments. But I also wanted to just go back to Saturday Night Live for a second, because, yeah, I agree with you and think it's not very funny. But for some reason, in US entertainment, it's seen as a real pinnacle of somebody's music career to appear as a live performer on Saturday Night Live, or a host even. Can you think of any iconic
Hmm.
performances on Saturday Night Live that you've seen that you really enjoyed?
I mean, I remember Madonna presenting, but I don't think she actually performed music on that episode. I think Simple Minds were the musical guest on that episode when
That must have
Madonna
been a very long
presented.
time ago.
It was like, it would have been 80, I don't know, 7. It was just after Madonna and Sean Penn had gotten married. So what was that, 1986, 87? Um, but yeah, I've not, I think I might have only watched like 2 or 3 episodes of Saturday Night Live in my whole life. Just
I
because,
only
like I
ever
said,
see,
it's not my thing.
yeah, I only ever see the music things on YouTube now, or clips. I would never sit down and watch an entire episode. But the most
Mm.
famous, or the most impactful for me, was when Janet Jackson performed the song "If" on Saturday Night Live, and
I don't
I
think
thought
I
that
saw
was
that.
amazing, like a really incredible dance routine, and it's iconic. But apart from that, I don't know. It's just I honestly don't find the humor at all palatable. Like I can't. I never would laugh at a skit that I saw on Saturday Night Live.
I remember, I don't know how many years ago this was, but I remember when Tina Fey was doing her impression of Sarah Palin on Saturday Night Live, and that was quite funny. But again, it had limited it had limited sort of value. It was funny at first because she really did sort of embody the look and the sound of Sarah Palin. But then after, a minute or two of that, it's like, okay, well, it's, the actual, the, the writing, the comedy writing underneath is just not that great, I don't think. And I know that, supposedly all these great comedy writers have come through. And, Tina Fey is a great comedy writer. She's written some really funny stuff. But yeah, it's just not. It's not for me.
Comedians are a really acquired taste, and there are some people that a lot of people find incredibly funny or engaging or hilarious, who I just can't see any attraction to. But then vice versa. I have tickets next week to go and see uh, what's his name? I can't remember his name now.
I
And
don't
I'm
know.
just Frankie Boyle.
Oh right.
I, I'm going to see Frankie Boyle, and I know that a lot of people find his humor, well, not funny or offensive. And but I think it's clever and hilarious and disarming, and I really enjoy it. But can you remember when we went to see Sandra Bernhard in? Were you there in Sydney at the Metro Theatre?
At the Yeah, in Newtown. Was it the Metro Theatre?
Yeah,
No,
in
the
Marrickville or wherever
En-
it is. Yeah.
Enmore Theatre. Was it the Enmore Theatre?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, the Enmore Theatre, and
Yeah,
she.
right
I
next
mean,
to
she's
Newtown
to
Station.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, she's hilarious, and I love her, and I've seen her a lot of times. But her comedy just really wasn't landing with that crowd. But she was telling
Hmm.
jokes about Condoleezza Rice. And I think the majority of people in the crowd didn't know who Condoleezza Rice was. And so it was like she was doing her
Yeah.
routine that she would do for a US audience, but for an Australian audience. And people just weren't really getting it. So I think there's a
Yeah. I
real
mean,
art
it just
form
hasn't
for,
been adapted, had it?
no, it's a real art form for people to know their audience and to be able to adapt the content. What's
Hmm.
the most enjoyable comedy show you think you've ever seen?
Oh, Sandra Bernhard. She's had some, like, I've been to see some of her shows have just been fantastic. Um, I mean, back at Largo, like years ago, when Amy Mann would have, sometimes it would be Patton Oswalt, but other times she'd have other comedians come on stage with her. Now, Patton Oswalt is very funny, um, like side splitting kind of humor. He's been very funny, but I don't know. I I think we went to see Frankie Boyle once, didn't we, at the Soho Theatre?
Yes, yeah.
But
Do
that was
you
years ago.
do you remember seeing uh, Jill Sabule at Largo? And she did that show, the Jill and Julia show.
Jill and Julia, yeah,
Do you remember what Julia's last
and that
name
was
was?
funny. Julia,
Is it Sweeney?
no, Sweeney, yeah, Julia Sweeney or McSweeney.
I can't
Um,
remember. Sweeney
yeah,
just came to
that
my
was
head.
very funny. Yeah, that was very funny. And who was the comedian we saw at Largo? I can't. I think it might have been an Amy Mann show, or it might have been a Jill Sobule show. Anyway, there was a comedian that was like one of the opening acts, and all she did was she just mimed to a Joan Rivers comedy skit. Like that was
I
her.
have
That was her
no
show.
memory of that at all. No memory of that at all.
Really, and that was quite funny.
Didn't we see? Now,
Um,
this is where my memory goes completely haywire. Do you know there's that comedian and actor who was in that movie about child abuse, uh, Mysterious Skin, and
yes,
she played the friend. Didn't we see her do a stand up show somewhere?
I think that I think that might have been her who did the Joan
Oh,
Rivers miming skit. I think. And I
okay.
just saw her actually in something else recently. What was I watching recently? The what was it called? I think it was called The Dropout with Amanda Siegfried. Is that her name? Amanda Siegfried. About Theranos, and I think that she was in that as well. I can't remember her name, but yeah, she was in Mysterious Skin. She was the sort of the kind of girlfriend who believed in UFOs and like alien abductions and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. She's a very funny
What was?
actor. I've
Yeah, I
seen
can't
her
remember
in
her
a lot of
name.
things, and she's very entertaining. What's
Yeah.
the what's the funniest TV show do you think you've watched?
I do you know I hate these questions. What's the most? What's the least? What's the a because
Well,
my memory is so shockingly bad. But I don't have my brain just doesn't work like that. My brain doesn't have like you always talk about your top five films. I can't I can't do that. My brain just doesn't work like that. Um, Funny shows that come to mind are things like 30 Rock.
mm,
Um, I used to love, I used to love Roseanne before she got all problematic. And they carried on the show when she left after, because, for the viewers that aren't familiar with what happened, Roseanne tweeted something racist, and she said it was because she'd taken Ambien or some kind of medication anyway, as if like medication makes you racist. But they decided to continue the show without Roseanne, and they renamed it The Connors, and it's still going. I think there's
really?
probably a new season coming out this year. This season, I suppose, will be a new season of that. And it's not great. It's not just because Roseanne's not in it. It's just I think the writing is not fantastic, but I suppose there's such a history with those characters. Like I grew up watching Roseanne. I grew up with Darlene and Becky and Aunt Jackie, and um, there's just something, and it's clunky, it's clumsy, but it's also quite interesting. Um, Thinking about the current situation that the US is in, like the political situation in the US, that the show is neutral. I don't think they
Mhm.
take a political stance one way or the other. And they do sort of portray both sides. They do portray maybe not Trump voters, but they portray right wing and left wing politics on the show. And there aren't many shows, I think, that do that in a compassionate way. And it's actually something I wanted to talk about this week with you here on the podcast, because I'm flying on Thursday. I'm flying to the US to visit my brother in Philadelphia. And obviously, it's about is it 2 weeks? I think 2.5 weeks to go until the election, and so the political situation at the moment in the states is at sort of boiling point, and obviously, Philadelphia is in a swing state in Pennsylvania, and so I'm a bit like, I'm looking forward to seeing my family and everything, but I'm also a bit sort of not nervous exactly, but I I struggle to feel anything but sort of ridicule towards Trump voters. And I know that's not maybe the most constructive way to feel about a significant portion of a society. Um, I wish I could understand it more, and I think I do understand a little bit why people vote for Trump, but it terrifies me, it angers me, it frustrates me, and it's scary to be in a place where there are, lots of people who think it's okay to put a vote next to his name on a ballot paper. Do you know what I mean?
Do
Like, it's
you
just,
do you feel that it's a bit of a bad time to go to the US? Have you second guessed yourself about going so close to something that
do you
could?
know, I mean, I feel like there aren't really any good times to go to the US, are there? Like, there's always, I mean, there's always, like, the entirety of our lives, and before that, there's always been the problematic nature of gun violence and gun laws in America. Um, and it's, it is a real sort of love hate thing. I love a lot of things about America. I love the landscapes. I think they have some of the most stunning landscapes I've ever seen. I mean, I'm sure there are lots around the world that I haven't seen, but of the ones I have seen, I think some of the landscapes, particularly in the sort of southwest of the USA, are sort of spectacular, like beyond, um, you know, beyond words. It's something
Yeah.
to sort of experience. Um, and there are, people I love very much in the US as well. But yeah, like it's I suppose in answer to your question, though, I'd rather go now than after the election, because if Trump wins, and that's imagining that we're actually going to find out the results on the 2nd of November. We probably won't. Probably it can take weeks because of recounts and swing
But
states and blah blah
do you
blah.
think
But
where there's a possibility that there'll be a sort of a recurrence of what happened where Trump says, "Oh, actually, I won," even if he didn't? Do you think there's a real possibility that that could happen?
no, definitely, definitely. Like, and he's not, him. Neither him nor JD Vance have said explicitly they will accept the results. Um, and you know what? Even at this point, it's just so volatile that even if they did, I don't know that people have become so, um, they've become so divided that I don't even know if people would accept the results. Whether Trump and Vance um,
Yeah.
accept the results themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking on here a little while ago about how desensitized people have come to news cycles. And I mean, I'm sure a million things will have happened by the time this episode comes out. But on the news today, there was footage of Donald Trump at a rally. It might have been in Philadelphia, I'm not sure. But after being on stage for a very, very short amount of time, he just said, "I'm not going to answer any more questions. Can we play some music instead?" And he asked them to play music. And he stood on stage for over half an hour, just stood there in one spot. He looked incredibly unwell. He looked confused. He looked, and I'm not just saying this as somebody who's anti Trump, he looked like, an older person with either memory loss issues or dementia. And he looked very confused. And everyone around him just stood there and let him stand there listening to music. And they played Ave Maria, they played YMCA, they played about 36 minutes, I think it went on for, until somebody came on stage and took him away. And people in the crowd looked
Really.
extremely confused.
But he's what, 78, 79, and it's absurd to expect anyone, I think, um, of that age to do the campaigning that is required, let alone to then, should they win, do the job. And that's why the Democrats thankfully decided Biden was no longer a viable option. But it's, I don't want to sound ageist. I suppose in theory, age shouldn't matter, but when it comes to the intensity of campaigning that the presidential race requires, I mean, you wouldn't want anyone you knew of that age. You would just say to them, no, that's like, you should not be putting yourself through that.
But
Let
also,
alone then, yeah.
what do you think the obsession is, or the seeming obsession with having the oldest people possible running in these races. Because, like you're saying, you look at Biden and you look at Trump, they are both old men. They're not just elderly, they are old. They're, I mean, they're the oldest possible people. I'm sure there are probably some people in the Senate or whatever still holding on as well. But what's the
Mm.
obsession with US politics to bring out these incredibly old people?
I I would I would say just off the top of my head, I think it's to do with patriarchy that old white men are seen as powerful in many sections of society, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and that you could look across the world at political leaders, and women are very, very poorly represented, and young people, regardless of their gender, are also poorly represented because I think we elevate age and privilege and education as being the important things rather than morals or ethics necessarily. What I know. What do you
I've
think?
been
Do you have a?
I've been listening to a few people who have said they wouldn't go back to the USA if Trump was reelected. How do you feel about what is that, like the deal breaker for you to make you feel like you wouldn't go there again? And I mean, be mindful that we are recording this and putting it out to the world, and the US government might use it against you.
I know, because don't you, when you do your ESTA application, you have to list your social media channels, don't you? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I Right now, I would say no. I would not want to visit a USA under Trump's presidency. I have in the past, in that brief period um, between after the election and before the inauguration, when Biden was sworn in. I was in the States, and it was really depressing. I went to Joshua Tree National Park, and I went into the ranger's office or whatever, the ranger station or visitor center or whatever. Yeah, the visitor center, and they had a photograph of President Trump up on the wall, even though it was in January, so it was only about a week or two away from the inauguration when Biden would have taken over and they would have replaced it. And they have to, because they're a federal agency, and they have to have a photograph of the current president on their wall. And that was sobering enough, but at least then I could content myself in the knowledge that in a week or two it would have been replaced by Biden. Not that that's a whole other conversation about the
Yeah.
problematic nature of Biden. But anyway, um, but yeah, like if Trump does win, and I still can't believe that's a sentence I'm saying out loud. If Trump wins, that it's a possibility, and it really is a possibility. I probably wouldn't want to go. I don't know. Would you want to go to the US under a Trump presidency?
I could see myself visiting, but I have extremely mixed feelings. I also have to remind myself that the USA is not Donald Trump, and Donald Trump isn't the USA. It's just uh, what do you call it? Like a signpost of how messed up their system is, the fact that he could be elected. But there are lots of loving and compassionate people in the USA as well who I'm interested in, and culture and music and arts. And like you said before about the landscapes, I really, really think there's some of the most beautiful places on the planet in the USA. But what it does give me sort of reason to pause is the idea that people are emboldened by this kind of thing, that if Trump gets in power, that people are not as friendly to queer people, or if I'm traveling with Hill, people feel more emboldened to be racist towards people who present as Mexican. So for me, it does give
Mm.
me reasons to worry about going there. And that's not to say that these elements are taken out of the equation if Trump doesn't win. I mean, that's still there. It's a big part of US culture and modern life all over the world. But I just feel that him being so blatant and being so outlandish with his bigotry, it just gives people an excuse to go that extra step with it, and that makes me feel a bit
Yeah, like
worried.
having a having a figurehead who will just come out with such horrific statements about migrants, or about so many things that he said. It does make you question, the effect that has on society at large. And yeah, like you said, of course, there are lots of, and this is kind of where I was, where I wanted to start, when I started the conversation, the sort of point I was trying to make. It was like, well, what do we do? Like, what do we do as individuals, particularly when we're not part of that community, when we're from overseas? But what do we do with people who vote for Trump? And I mean, I don't mean what do we do with them, like, where do we send them or anything like that. But I just mean, like, how do we approach that mentally, emotionally? How do we kind of move forwards, acknowledging that a significant number of people were happy, will be happy to vote for Trump, whether he wins the election or not? What do we do with that information, that society has become so polarized, and sees things in such binaries that they think it's okay to vote for somebody who says those things? What do we do with that? How do we try and not just write those people off?
Yeah, it's also hard to feel some sort of connection with people who think that that's an acceptable way to vote. That because I think at the core of it, the modern Republican Party and the modern Democratic Party, they have a lot of similarities in the fact that they are controlled by big business. They're they have a real concern with warmongering and capitalism is at the heart of everything. But so you have to sort of nitpick some of those differences. And for me, having someone who has sexually abused women would be the deal breaker, right? So, like, if I was there and I had to vote, I'd be like, okay, well, kind of the lesser of two evils. What are we going to do here? Okay, let's not vote for the person who sexually assaults people. And when
Mm.
people make the other decision the other way, it makes me really question whether I could even talk to people like that. What could I possibly say to them?
I know, and that's it. What do we do with that information? If you've got somebody in your life, a friend or a family member, perhaps, who defends a sex criminal, a convicted sex criminal, you probably would distance yourself from them. You would say, I don't want to be their friend. I don't want to have them in my day-to-day life. And so
Mm-hmm.
what do we do with stuff like that? And this is not it's not really a problem exclusive to the US either. Like, Brexit really divided the UK, and politics generally is does seem to becoming more divisive all around the world. What do we what does the future look like? It's pretty scary. I don't really know where it's heading.
Well, to change tack a little bit, but you did mention the future and where is the future heading? I started thinking a lot today because I'm 50. I started thinking a lot today about retirement and what does that mean for somebody who's working class? Because um, there's so much to think about with retirement. Like, how am I going to pay my bills when I can no longer work? Do you give things like that much thought? Do you ever sit down and think about retirement and make plans, or does it still feel like it's something way in the future when you grow up?
I feel like I haven't grown up yet. I feel like I haven't even figured out what to do, for work, for my life. I mean, I know what I want to do, and that is to make music, but I also know how difficult it is to make money through that. Um, so I don't think about my individual future that much. Well, actually, that's not true. I think I do, and all as naive perhaps as it might be, or as simplistic as it might be, the future I imagine, or the future I want, is to just be, um, creating music, having a garden, and having the capacity to travel, and see people I love, and that's it really.
Do
But I
what you
do think a
didn't, what
lot
you,
about honest.
I was just going to cut you off and say what you didn't mention there is what role you would play as an older person in society. So, like you talked about what will make you happy, like to make music, to garden, to visit your friends. But how do you see yourself as an
Mm.
active community member? What do you see yourself doing when you're not of a working age to be part of the community?
I mean, I think a lot about when I'm older, uh, doing some sort of community gardening project. So I don't necessarily mean sort of producing, growing crops or anything like that, like in an
Hmm.
allotment or something like that. I think more as just in a role of sort of advocating for the planting of trees for future generations. I mean, there's that quote, isn't there? Society grows. What is it? What do you know the quote I'm talking about? When I mean it's gender, which I don't like, but it's when society grows wise when men plant trees under whose shade they will never sit. So it's about sort of planting seeds for future generations to reap the benefits of, whether that's literally taken, literally in terms of planting a tree, or whether you look at it more, figuratively and think about, planting the seeds of ideas that future generations will benefit from. And I think that is, on a literal sense, something I would be wanting to do. And I already do that, in my life anyway. I try and sort of plant things and hope that they grow to live hundreds of years and that future generations will enjoy. Um, but it's, I don't know. I haven't given
We
it much thought. What about you? Do you have?
Yeah, I think about it all the time. I think about how I'm going to be a viable older person and what I will offer the world. I also worry a lot about where my income will come from when I'm older, being like having no savings and being 50 years old. And it's something that makes me worry a lot, especially the way that I see conservative governments around the world and even so called progressive governments cutting public spending and pensions and security blankets around the people's finances. I do worry about what will happen to me when I get older, and it's something I that does cause me. As I get older, it causes me more and more concern. Like I think about it a lot because I think when you're younger, you just think you'll never be old. You'll never. Like in
Hmm.
my 20s, I honestly thought I'd be dead. In your 30s, 40s, it just feels like it will never come. Now that I'm 50 years old, I am, 10 years away from being 60. And 60 sounds old to me. It sounds like an old age person. And I'm
But
closer to
governments
that.
around the world keep pushing the retirement age up. So when we were young, people could retire, I think, when they were about 61, 62. And now I think you have to work until you're about 68 or 70 in some cases. um, and so, yeah, like it's yeah, the future. I mean, I don't think too much about the future because I suppose I am not convinced the civilization will last that long anyway, with the way things are going at the moment. I
Yeah.
mean, if Trump wins an election, and like, I mean, we don't think we even have the time now to get into the whole situation going on in the Middle East at the moment. Like, it feels very much like the building blocks of human civilization are just crumbling. And so, I mean, yeah, I don't really think too much about the sort of day-to-day existence of being old and retired. I'm more concerned with actually there still being a civilization and a planet to live on in 20 years'
Do
time.
you think do you think that we just think this is the worst it's ever been because we're in the middle of it and humans are really self-centered creatures? Obviously, there's things like global warming, which are probably the worst it's ever been. But from
Uh,
a geopolitical point of view, do you think we are just being a little bit more focused on how bad it is because we're in it? But if we were in the Middle Ages, we might think, oh, really, the world's about to end because look how terrible people are treated.
Well, I think it's impossible to compare, isn't it? Because we live in such a different era. You know, we have such a globalized society. We know what's going on all around the world, and of course, you know that is skewed. What we see on the news is, of course, skewed by media companies and everything, and governments. But generally, we have a much better, a broader sense of what's going on in the world, and the the climate breakdown which is happening at the moment, and our knowledge, or for some of us who choose to accept the scientific, you know, evidence or argument that the climate is breaking down, um, that that sort of, it levels, not levels a playing field, but you know what I mean. It kind of cuts across every other situation. I mean, yes, like the wars that are going on in the world are awful. The political corruption and the abuses of power and prejudice that's going on in the world is awful. But all of that is kind of overshadowed by the actual fucking climate like breaking down, you know, and it's, I don't know, like it just, that to me, of course, you know, during other periods, like during the world wars and stuff, it must have seemed awful. But I don't know, this, I think we're in the middle of this massive existential crisis at the moment. And we're, a lot of people are just burying their heads in the sand about it. I don't know.
And
It's,
the people who obviously are suffering, there's a real propensity to talk when talking about climate change about what will happen in the future, but it's happening now. I mean, if you look at the
yeah.
storms, the amount of um, hurricanes happening in Florida, constantly back to back to back
Yeah.
hurricanes. Think of all of these low lying Pacific islands that are being swallowed up by rising ocean tides, levels, and people
Mm-hmm.
having mass migration based on the effects of climate change. I mean, that's happening now. It's been happening for decades. And
Yeah.
but we are
And
in such a
invariably it affects poor people and people of color like more.
yeah.
And yet, you know, I think European, well, maybe not European only, but like, you know, Northern Hemisphere societies are not addressing it as urgently as they should be, and not acknowledging their role to play in it as much as they should be.
Except for they'll acknowledge it when there are people coming across their borders looking for safety and water and
Right,
crops, and that's happening all around the world. I
right.
mean, the effects of um, globalization are forcing people to leave their homes and uh, travel to countries that are safer and more secure, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where people in those countries are complaining, and it's it's
Mm.
good, and that's going to be a really big instigator of conflict going over the next few decades. People trying to protect what
Yeah,
they have from people who need it to survive. It'll be like Mad
yeah.
Max.
And it goes back to, was it last week or maybe it was a few weeks ago? I think we were saying a similar thing. I can't remember the context, but you know, I think we were talking about trans issues, and I was saying, you know, you just wish the government would just, instead of, you know, doing this political game, you wish the government would just say to everyone, like, just let fucking trans people live their lives and have self determination. And it's like, it doesn't even affect you. Like, it's got nothing to do with, like, you know, fucking 90% of the population. So why it's even being used as a political football in the first place is sort of beyond me. But, and it's the same thing. It reminds me of that when you were talking about, you know, retirement, and I was saying how retirement ages are going up. You know, this is because we have in sort of first world countries, if you want to use that terminology, or highly developed nations, or very rich nations, basically, such as the UK, you do have an aging population. People are having fewer and fewer children. And so we need migration. We need people to come and join society here, become productive members of society, work so that so that people can retire and have uh, a pension, you know, that is paid for by taxpayers. And yet people are saying, oh, we don't want migrants. But what do they think is going to happen? Do they want to work until they're 80 then? Do they want to have no pension because people are having fewer children here? And it's just like, but the government, I don't know why the government isn't just like saying that,
And
but I don't know, it just
that's the reality
frustrates me.
for a lot of that's the reality for a lot of countries. They don't have pensions or social security because
Yeah,
there isn't
yeah,
the wealth, the
yeah.
internal wealth, and there aren't people paying that enough taxes
And the
to pay
historical
for that.
wealth, yeah.
And also in
And that might
the
mean that the future of, sorry, just to finish my point, that might mean that the future of this country might look different in its religious makeup. It might look different in its racial makeup. And that's fine. So fucking what? Like, people have got to get over themselves. Like, you know, it's, it's, the world is just in a constant state of flux. And if, because there's no doubt in my mind, if we were getting a lot of migration from white developed nations, there wouldn't be anywhere near as much of an outcry. It's based on racism, and there are so many people that, oh no, it's not about being racist. It's about the economy, or it's about blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, bullshit, because actually migration always shows, there are so much research to show that migration has a net economic benefit for a country, especially
yeah.
in countries in Europe where we have an aging population and we need more people to come in and work and be members of a productive society. And so, yeah,
And
it
what is
frustrates
happening
me.
with the cost of living crisis in the UK is that people who do live here, who are citizens, are not able to afford to have children. So we're having this situation where people are living in share houses until they're much older than they would have like 20, 30, 40, 50
Mm,
years ago.
mm,
I mean, share houses wouldn't have been a thing for a lot of baby boomers, and you would move out of your family's house into a house with your partner and you would have kids straight away and you would populate that house with children. Now people are moving into
mm,
share houses with other adults. There isn't the space or the money, disposable income to
mm,
raise children. So the population
mm.
of the citizens in the UK is extremely low, and one of the reasons for that, one of the main drivers, is because nobody's got any money anymore because of the way
Mm.
the country has been run, and the cost of living has spiraled,
And
and
I think
privatization of
it's
all our
not just
services.
that though, but I think it's also that on a, like, the not the demographics. What am I trying to say? Like, the society has changed. Like, a generation ago, people just thought all what they had to do was to grow up, get married, get a job, and have a family, and that was their role. And we've now gotten to a stage, and whether that's, it's for multiple reasons. I think the way religion has lost its role in society. I think for so many multitude of reasons, people aren't seeing those as necessarily priorities anymore or things to aspire to. I think there are so many people who have consciously chosen not to have children because they just think, well, it's not something I want to do. I don't feel the societal pressure to do that anymore. And also, I mean, some people are starting to recognize the the strain it puts on resources, and that the world can't continue to support a growing population. I mean, I don't know how many billion people we are now, but we can't just continue, you know, reproducing and using more and more and more resources. But I don't know. It's just,
Yeah, we really
yeah,
need
there's
to let the
so many
people
reasons
who
for it.
Yeah, we really need to let people move around to where the resources are, instead of instead of the government telling us, oh, you've got to have more kids here, and then keep everybody out of the country. There needs to be that freedom of movement for people to be able to go to where the resources and the wealth
Yeah,
and everything people need to survive, where that is located.
yeah, and countries also need to um, take some responsibility as well for the reasons why people have to migrate in the first place. And I mean, that's nothing new. That's an issue that's been going on for decades. You look at the USA again. You look at all the um, unrest they caused in Central America by financially supporting certain governments or certain military coups and stuff like that, military sort of rebel groups and stuff like that. And the repercussions of that are still being felt in societies today, and being one of the main sort of reasons why people migrate north towards the USA. And so now, they're being demonized and shat upon for wanting to escape a shitty situation, which was caused in part by that country in the first place. And it's
Well,
the same in Europe. There are so many ex colony countries
mhm.
which the situations there which are forcing people to migrate are caused by having been colonized in the first place.
Yeah, and a similar thing where I'm from in Australia. Australia is an extremely rich country, mostly because of colonial goings on and trouble and the subjugation of the First Nations people there, and also because of the exploitation of neighboring countries and the stealing of resources, war, and it is a problem now that people could go to Australia and enjoy the wealth of that country and that land, but Australia is racist and locks people out of it. So, but this is
Yeah,
this is taking us
yeah.
kind of towards the end of the hour. But I still want to know about retirement. Do you have any plans on where you would like to end up, and where do you see yourself once you're sort of past a working age? Where do you want to be living?
I think it depends on so many factors because I it depends how financially stable I am. I wouldn't want to grow old in this country on a very meager pension. The weather, not being able to afford to heat my home, having to suffer our long, drawn out, cold, dark winters. Um, I would like probably to retire somewhere warmer, um, but then of course global climate breakdown will probably change what that looks like in 15 years time or 20 years time or however many years. I mean, how old will I have to be? How old will I have to keep working until? I might have to keep working until I'm 75. That's another,
Mm.
what is that? That's another 27 years away. Who knows what
That's
the world will look like then,
that's quite
politically and in
depressing to
terms of
me.
climate.
When I think about the amount of time that I might have to work, that's quite depressing. When I think of all of the working years behind me, and I started working full time when I was 15, and I think, oh, I could
Mm-hmm.
really do with retirement. Of course, I'm in no financial situation to do that, but it would be such a wonderful feeling to not work and not be part. Like, I don't mean not work and do nothing. I don't want to be like that. I want to be productive, but I don't want to be within that contextual framework of being employed by somebody and having to go and do work for money so I can pay my bills. I would like to be contributing to society and I would like to work my brain and my body, but I don't want to be employed. It's such a horrible situation. I know that's a really privileged thing to say because for a lot of people, they need to be employed, they want to be employed, but it's just that the indignity of being having a boss.
Well, but it goes back to, well, it goes full circle really, because when we talk about Trump and Biden and their ages and why they're the, well, not anymore because Biden pulled out, but why they were the presidential nominees for the election. But and then obviously we were talking about what we imagine ourselves doing, but then what do you do? Like, it's not so much that you want to not work. You just don't want to be beholden to a company, but I'm sure you still, and I certainly, speaking for myself, would still want to be a productive member of society when I'm, I don't know, 70, 75, 80. I still want
Yeah.
to do things, but what can people do, And it's, I mean, not to sound too idealistic, but we do really need to sort of restructure society, don't we? We really do need to create new roles for people as they get older. People still have a lot to contribute and a lot to say and a lot of thoughts and ideas. And now in the current system under capitalism, you just work, 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 work until you sort of physically can't anymore, mentally can't anymore.
Mm-mm.
And then you just, that's it. It's
Yeah.
so
Well,
problematic.
this is quite a depressing episode. The way that this has gone, it started with the
I
chaos of
know.
technology not working. I'm now sitting in the dark, if you can't tell.
I
Um,
know. I was
I'm
going to say we're going to have to stop in a minute because I can't see you anymore.
I'm illuminated by only by the light of my laptop screen because we were messing around with the technology for so long. I would normally do it in daylight, but we took so long to get this started that the sun has actually gone down. So I think if we wrap up now, hopefully this video is usable because of the time delay
Yeah,
between
we won't
us.
actually know, but we were saying earlier this afternoon that because because last week's episode was about death and life after death, or the possibility of life after death. We were going to try and do a bit of an upbeat episode this week. But we did start with comedy. We started with Saturday Night Live and stuff, but we seem to have once more mined our doom and gloom and pessimism about the world.
Okay, well, I for some reason blurted out the word soap opera at the beginning of this, so maybe that could be a more
Oh
light-hearted
yeah.
approach in a future episode. I'd love to talk about soap operas, but anyway,
Okay, we will.
I hope you have a really good trip to the US. Say hi to your family for me,
Thank you.
and try
I
and stay
will.
out of trouble with the politics over there. And to everybody else, if you want to follow
Yeah, I'm
me,
not
you
going to
can follow me
discuss it
at
with anyone.
Okay, you can follow me at Fake Vegan on Instagram, and you can follow Josh at Josh and the Jumpstarts on Instagram, and also click on the link in this description of this video, and you can listen to the full theme song of this podcast, and that's by Josh and the Jumpstarts. So go and give that a stream, and while you're over there on Spotify, check out some Josh's other song, which is came out a week or two ago, and give it a listen. So thanks to everyone. And Josh, I'll let you close out the episode.
Well, thanks. You've said everything I was going to say anyway, but yeah, please also subscribe to the podcast. That really helps our algorithms. Leave us a comment either on YouTube or on Spotify, on the Spotify app. You can leave a comment on individual episodes. You can follow us on YouTube. You can follow us on Spotify. But yeah, hopefully this episode was recorded okay. There's been a horrible audio delay for us, so I'll have to go back and play it now and see whether it works or not. But hopefully it's been understandable for you. Hopefully you've been able to follow along and there hasn't been too much confusion with the technological challenges that we've had. But we'll be back in your feeds this time next week, and I think we have a Halloween episode coming up for you then, so look out for that. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.